ever noticed how the really meaningful changes in your life are most often the result of a crisis? Hello?
Miss Snider?
Yes?
I'm sorry to be the one to tell you this, but it didn't work out.
What didn't work out?
Your money? It's all gone.
In 1987, I went to work for a small computer supplies wholesaler in Dallas. At the time, their annual sales were $36 million a year. I was just a few years out of college. I started as a clerk in the purchasing department, actually a part-time clerk. And I was there for 8 years, and in 8 years, a lot changed. Our sales went from $36 million a year to $1 billion. My career took me from part-time clerk to senior management. With each promotion I received, I also received additional responsibilities and pay. And some of that pay came in the form of stock options. Before I left, the last project that I worked on, along with dozens of other people in the company, was taking the company public. The year was 1995, and in the moment that my employer's ticker symbol crossed the tape for the very first time, suddenly I had more money than most people dream of having even after a lifetime of work. I was 31. My parents sent me to some of the finest schools that this country has to offer. In the first grade, I was taking French. In high school, business law. I graduated from college with a degree in business. I took classes in corporate finance. I could tell you, I could do double entry accounting. I could tell you about supply and demand curves. I could program a computer, and I could read a novel in French. Yet, I knew nothing about investing or taking care of my money. Nowhere along the way had anyone ever sat me down and explained the basics of personal finance or investing. I turned all of my money over to that broker. Seeing as he was the expert, right, I gave him full discretion over my account. And once he assured me that I could get a check anytime I wanted simply by picking up the phone and asking for it, well, I did what any young, foolish, red-blooded American kid would do. I quit my job, and I had a really good time. For the next 2 years, I led a fantasy life. I did. I bought my first home, a high-rise condo in the poshest part of town overlooking the downtown Dallas skyline. I thumbed through the pages of D magazine, and I hired myself a decorator because, after all, I could afford one now. Some of my friends at the company bought Ferraris, but not me. I bought polo ponies. Here's a hint. Ferraris hold their value better than polo ponies. But look, the American dream was alive and well in Dallas, Texas, until that beautiful spring day in May.
Sorry to be the one to tell you this, but your money, it's all gone.
Yeah, at first, I did a lot of this, right? Because what happened to me was someone else's fault. I mean, it was the broker's fault. Clearly. He had said, Kim, you're young, you're single, you make a lot of money, you can afford to take a lot of risk. It was the school system's fault. I mean, come on. I can read a novel in French, but nobody's ever taught me how to balance a checkbook. It was my parents' fault. Because, well, at 33, everything is your parents' fault. But eventually, gradually, I came to terms with the unavoidable truth. It was my fault. I had abdicated responsibility for my money to someone else. And right then, I made a vow. Never, ever, ever again would I put my financial future in the hands of another human being. I would get smart, I would get educated about money, and from that moment forward, I alone would be accountable for whatever financial situation I found myself in. I'm happy to report that I have since gone from rags to riches to rags, back to riches. As I took the steps that I went through myself to put my own house in order, and I've developed a sort of checklist. I find that we call it the Family CFO checklist. I find it's very helpful because the thing that people really want to know is they need to know, number one, what do I do? But the other thing is, what order do I do it in? Because if you are like the vast majority of us, the fact of the matter is there's more things that need doing that are demanding of your time and money than you have money, right? So you got to decide, how do I prioritize and how do I know which order to do these things in? And so that's the reason that I created the Family CFO checklist. Now we're going to go through these in a little bit of detail in the time that I have, each one of them, so I'll explain it to you. And just so that you know, I will make the Family CFO checklist available to you as well. But here, just so that you have an overview, here's what they are. The first step in the Family CFO checklist is to create personal financial statements. It's the very first thing that I did when I decided to get my house in order, right? One of the things, there's a reason I call my book How to Be the Family CFO. There's a reason that I title my speeches Applying the Business, the Principles of Business to the Business of You, Inc. Right? Most of us slog our guts out at a job 9 to 5 for years on end, right? And we devote almost no time to the job, the most important job, which is that of Family CFO. Right? You've got to begin to think about running your finances in the same way you would if you were the CFO of a company. Because truthfully, if you do think about it, if you start to do personal financial statements and you realize the inflows and outflows of your household over a period of years, you run a fairly significant enterprise. You need to begin to treat it like that. Having financial statements is the first step. We'll talk more about that. And let me go backwards in just a second. Step 2 is to ensure the risks you cannot afford to take. Okay, we'll talk more about that. Oh, Kim, quit hitting the button. Number 3, pay off bad debt. I put debt in different categories: bad debt, better debt. We'll talk about the differences. Number 4, stash emergency funds. Number 5, create the cash flow to replace your W-2 income. The way you figure out how wealthy you are is you ask a very simple question. If I could no longer work, if my paycheck stopped coming in today, how long could I live, given the assets that I have? For some of you, that would be a day, a week, a month, a year, 2 years, 5 years. Your goal is to make that indefinite. The financial success is the ability to maintain a reasonable lifestyle indefinitely into the future without work or worry. And no, you don't have to be Donald Trump to make that happen. Okay? You're trying to get to that as quickly as you can. And by the way, most people call that retirement. I just think that you should seek to be able to do that as a safety net whenever you chose. So that if you became sick or disabled or needed to care for an aging family member, or you lost your job, or you wanted to take a year off and backpack around Europe, that you could do that if you chose to. That's financial success, all right? So creating the cash flow to replace your W-2 paycheck. Next step, number 6, is to diversify. We'll talk about that. And number 7, then you can do all these other things that most people do first.